Hi, and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 49, and today we're diving into Dominaria United Draft Primer. So we're going to start exploring the format just before it's released. I didn't play it, so there's that. But I did do a skeleton stream, and I did talk with many great limited minds where I could digest their ideas, add my own spin on them, and we're going to be talking about that. But before we start, a word from the sponsor. I'm sponsored by the mtgazone.com, where I also write articles. Actually, just today, my article dropped on removal in Dominaria United. How does it align with the format? What are the tricks, pitfalls, and hopes for it? Um, Quite a lengthy one because I went pretty deep this time. Uh, but if you're bored with my writing, there's plenty of other people that write about limited there. There are some deck skeletons by Doggart Cubones. And there is the full set review by the one and only, I hope at least that it's the only, because two of those and the world would be a bit too much, J2S Josh. Um, so please check it out after the seminar. There's plenty there. So by clicking on my articles, you make them think that I'm actually useful. So that would be great. But let's dive into Dominaria United because I am super excited about the set. I might not seem super excited because I'm an old geezer and my excitement is not supported by enough endorphins. But before, I always start with the preamble. And today's preamble is formats are not solved earlier in the modern day. I think that people give up on figuring them out sooner. And this is based on a question that Jerry Kuboro Retox asked Mark Rosewater. Is there any concern regarding how much faster it feels like sets are solved? I would like to stress the word feels the uh, in the question because I think that it is a lot to do with feeling. With regards to limited now due to the MTGA arena than they used to be. It feels like a week or less after the set releases, Limited Focus podcast will have episodes out where they talk about the 50 plus drafts that they've already done and all the data that's been collected digitally to tell you what the best colors and cards are when there's still weeks of months left with the set as the main draft set. It is a big concern. That was the answer from Mark Rosewater. So definitely what's he at least want to tell us that they are concerned. I don't know if how concerned they are, but okay. Um, and I think that the question is based on this premise of feeling that the formats are solved. And I don't think that is the truth at all. I think that the first 2 weeks, first of all, the formats are not stabilized yet. I did the whole episode on evolution of the format based on 17 lens data. And only after 2 weeks, you get sort of like stable pick orders developing. And the stable pick orders developing, that still um, um, does not guarantee that the format is stale and that the win rates don't change. Squirrel Mob at mtgazone.com. Um, and I think that lots of people, when they see data, they think, well, okay, the data said we can just stop figuring things out. And I think that's a very bad approach. I think that this is exactly the opposite of what I say when I'm mentioning that data should be the servant, not the master. This is actually taking data as the master rather than the servant. You look at the data, you say, oh, this is the win rate of this card. Well, we know everything. This is the best archetype. And in recent years, there's been plenty of examples when that's not been the case. Kamigawa, we started with the Sagas decks, and they were the super strongest archetype in the first week because they were the easiest to figure out and very wide open. It tightened a bit. People started figuring other things. The ninjutsu decks became good. Then mono red became good. There was plenty of evolution there. But people who decided that the evolution stopped didn't explore beyond that. And because they didn't explore beyond that, for them in their head, it just stopped evolving at that stage. Ikoria, first week was just a cycling fest. But cycling was not even the best deck for most of the format. It was like a grindy Mardu with sacrifice synergies. Later in the format, also some of the mutate decks were good. There was plenty to explore there beyond the cycling deck. Other examples, I think that blue black in Midnight Hunt, that was the best deck for the first 2 weeks. But later, as we progressed, actually blue white and blue green were stronger in terms of the win rate. Maybe they didn't come together as much, but that's the whole point. They didn't come together that much. But on the other hand, blue black was overdrafted enough that it was not the strongest. Thank you, Vigilance deck was the best thing in Ikoria, of course. Everyone knows that. Um, and I think that, of course, WotC is a company and they have to ask on perception of their product, not necessarily on how the product works. So they will have to. Oh, thank you very much, Mumin Latte. Elves in Kaldheim. Kaldheim also started with snow decks being super strong because no one picked Snowlands correctly. Once people started picking Snowlands correctly, the sort of Naya wedge, either it was white red or white green, aggro became the strongest deck. And then on the third wave, grindy sort of mid-range elf decks became the secret archetype that was winning a lot and very underdrafted as well. So there's been plenty of evolution past the first week, and those formats were not even close to being solved in those first weeks. So I think that the premise of formats being solved early is absolutely not true. I think that there is a perception it is, but this perception is linked to a certain dose of laziness in looking for answers and being satisfied with the first answer you find by people who are complaining that formats have been solved. And I will stand by that. Right. Preamble out of the way. Let's move on to the Dominaria United because that's what you're here, not to listen to a middle-aged guy ranting about things. Right. So to those that were in the court presentation, obviously, great minds and me think alike. I also divided Dominaria into the big picture of 5 colors and their roles. I did make slightly different definitions than Alex for it's semantics in quite a lot of examples there. But I think that white has a general theme of go wide, and lots of white cards do support it. And also lots of the cards that are on the sides of white and are multicolor will support the theme, not necessarily allowing you to go wide, but giving rewards to going wide. Blue, I defined it as tempo color because I think that lots of blue cards and lots of blue tinted cards will lean towards this kind of tempo strategies when you want to have a fast start and then control the board with tempo-based removal. Black I defined as attrition. Alex was talking about graveyard and sacrifice synergies. I think that those things are quite close. I think that there is like plenty of black cards that allow you to get a good rate and remove resources from the opponent and then take over the game through that. Red generally described aggression. It just has probably the best package of aggressive creatures and also is supporting other aggressive strategies very well. And green is focusing on domain. I don't know if you noticed, but all the green multicolor cards from the single pipped cycle, we're going to talk about the cycles in a second, all of them have domain and none other ones have. So basically everything around green revolves around this domain concept. But of course, if you have domain, there is also mana consideration. So it sort of like plays on the interface of mana and domain. And these are those meta synergies within colors. And from then, this format looks to me like you can go a bit off piste and draft similar color, no, same color pair, but in very different ways. So I think that you can conceive a blue-white tempo aggro deck, but you can also conceive a blue-white control deck. And I think both of them will be possible. Now, some of them will come together more frequently, and I think blue-white tempo deck will come in together more frequently, but I think that blue-white control will be a valid option sometimes and actually can be strong if you play it right. So I think that this format, similarly to Ikoria, will have those kind of like more jazz drafts where your first couple of picks sort of predefine what you're trying to do, and then you're going to change your pick order quite drastically from then on in order to maximize those synergies. And I think that maximizing those synergies will be quite important. So yeah, thank you for the raid, Mad Moses, by the way. Always appreciate it. So it is a not so secret multicolor set because officially I don't think it's a 3-color set, but it has quite a large fraction of cards that are multicolor because each color pair has 1 rare multicolor, 2 uncommons, two monocolor uncommons with the other color's kicker. So there, if you have white blue, you will have a white uncommon with a blue kicker and a blue uncommon with a white kicker, and the same with commons. So you have like sort of 7 multicolor cards. Now, not all of them are strictly multicolor, and we're going to be talking about that in more detail when we go to the archetype analysis. And I think that the colors where the monocolored uncommons are much more useful when they're played with the kicker are going to be much more coherent because of that, because you will get those extra rewards. Because if, let's say, a green card like Terra Sunder, which is like 2 mana, destroy artifact or enchantment, no one will pick that unless they are green black. When if you kick it, it becomes a removal for any type of non-land permanent, like infinitely better card. So if you're in a blue, in a green black, you're going to get rewards of getting this card quite late in later packs, because you are in the right position to draft it. One, if you have some cards like Tolarian Gazer, the 2 and a blue, bounce a creature, draw a card, and kicker for 1 white is gain 3 life. This gain 3 life is a nice bonus. It doesn't define the card. People from other colors will be picking that. So you will not get that reward of getting Tolarian Gazers because you're in a blue-white. Other color combinations are going to pluck it from you. So you're going to have a harder time gaining rewards from that. So it's worth keeping in mind, and it's worth keeping in mind which color pairs will have particularly good reward packages. So we're going to talk about removal first, as I usually do, because I think that removal is, before the format is released, is like a good, it's a good picture of what's going on in the format. And there's 4 categories of removal that I define, and there's unconditional removal, basically deals with anything. There's damage-based removal. Then we can calculate how many creatures does it kill, because based on number of creatures with toughness X. Conditional removal, which is usually with those weird conditions, like something must have flying and it has to be 3rd of August if you were playing an onset or something. And this time, for the first time, I'm going to be also talking about tempo removal, because I think that in this format, tempo removal is going to be particularly important. And by tempo removal, I mean things that don't kill a card permanently, but delay it, bounce it, stop it from attacking, phase it out, things like that, and allow you to push damage and win races when you basically play the tempo deck and your main resources are early aggression and using your life total and racing as a tool, basically. So a perfect game of a tempo matchup is you end up on 1 life with 0 cards in hand, and you achieved it by bouncing their last creature or something like that. So unconditional removal, there is a bunch of it. I don't know why, but white has a cycle of 3 Oblivion Ring type effects, which basically are enchantments that come into play and exile something until they leave play. And there is one at common, one at uncommon, and one at rare that I don't show here because, rare. And good news for them is that there's not so much that targets enchantments. There is no like incidental enchantment removal. I think that the only card that really might punish you is this Terra Sunder, which exiles artifact or enchantment, and with kicker can deal with anything. But obviously, if you want to remove enchantment, you just don't kick it. And of course, themselves can deal with them with themselves, because Prayer of Binding, for example, exiles a non-land permanent, so so they can exile theirs, and then your thing comes back. That's an option that they have. There's a couple of the mono black ones in Extinguish the Light and Bone Splinters. Now, Bone Splinters, of course, comes with a cost, so it tints you into a deck where you will sacrifice, because that's the additional cost to cast it, you will sacrifice something less meaningful. And I think that this sort of points you in the direction of either playing this with the steel creature of the opponent and then sacrifice it to kill another creature of the opponent, or you play some kind of black-white and you generate a lot of 1/1 soldiers, and you can just sacrifice a 1/1 soldier. So that's a lower cost. You don't sacrifice a whole card for that, for example. And Extinguish the Light is just more straightforward and just like 4 kill something. That's easy. And there's those 2 interesting ones, which are green and blue, but they only become a proper removal when you kick them with black. So they are sort of like pseudo-black removals. They will go into green-black and blue-black decks, respectively. And both of them look really solid. They were both removed for 4 mana at instant speed. Quite efficient removal for that format, I think. So in terms of damage removal, how does it look like in terms of percentages of things that every piece of removal kills? There is no dedicated 1 damage spell except for Smash to Dust, which is special, and we'll talk about it later because it's also a conditional removal. But there are a couple of effects that deal 1 damage, like this hurling Cyclops. There is also some kind of zombie skeleton thingy, 2/1. Is it goblin? Is the goblin 2/1 goblin that gives -1/-1 on death? And this deals with like 22% of common creatures. Not much in terms of uncommons. The uncommons are bigger than 1 toughness. That doesn't mean that they're big, because they actually are not, but they're all sort of like 2/3 toughness. Like lots of them are 2/3 toughness. So 1 damage spells don't do much, and there's some rares that they hit, but lots of those rares are going to be also constructed plants that you will not see on the board. So yeah. Cut down is conditional removal. We're gonna get there. So there's a couple of things that deal 2 damage, or actually there's nothing that deals 2 damage specifically, but there is a Tribute to Urborg that gives -2/-2 when you don't kick it. -2/-2 for this category, I treat it as damage. And there is the Flownstone Infusion, 1 mana spell that gives +2/-2. Well, of course, you can use it also as an aggressive trick, but it can also deal with 2 toughness creatures. And that actually is pretty decent because it kills like 54% of the common creatures, which is slightly above average for the recent sets. So I think that Streets of New Capenna had it a bit less, had a bit more, but there the reason was that there was plenty of things with shield counters, which didn't have that much toughness because they didn't need to, because they already have a shield counter. However, it only deals like with 1/3 of uncommons and rares, so not that much. Now there is a whole bunch of 3 toughness uncommons. For example, you can see that it goes from 31% at 2 damage that will be killed to 73% at 3 damage. So Lightning Strike is a prime example of a spell that deals 3 damage. I think that this is going to be one of the best commons. I don't know if it's going to be the best one, but it's going to be in top 3, top 5, almost definitely. And this is like killing 75% of the common creatures and like 73% of uncommons. So you see that it bridges the gap. It's as good for commons and as uncommons. Now, of course, you have to keep in mind that there is 2.4 commons of each common per pod when you draft on average, and 0.9 uncommons per pod on average. So you will see way more of those cards than of the rares. Rares, you will have like 0.3 rare per pod. So maybe the same rare, you will see 1 in 3-4 pods. And mythics, it's even less. It's like 0.15. So you will see them every 7-8 drafts. You will open it on your pod. You still probably won't see it because they are picked so quickly. So you have to open it. So divided by 8, you will see them every 50 something pods. So it's different numbers there. So yeah, commons and uncommons are going to be the creatures you're going to see much more. And that it doesn't kill like that many rares. 61%, still not nothing, but not that many. But it's a lesser problem because you will see them so much less. I think 75 is basically average for the last sets in terms of how many commons does the 3 damage spell kill. But Lightning Strike can also go face, which is not nothing. So I think it's going to be pretty powerful. Then we have 4 damage, and there is a Hurlon Battle Hymn. That card looks banging in my opinion. Like 3 mana to deal 4, and the kicker gain 4 that basically ends any race if you're playing aggressive deck versus aggressive deck. It kills 94% of uncommons. So there's very few uncommons that are large toughness. And I think that this is a characteristic of this format, and I think it's a part of the design. There is not so much of like big toughness creatures at any rarity, really. But particularly on uncommon, you don't see those kind of big. I think that there's like a 1/7/7, and that's basically it in terms of like chunks. There are some other creatures that will become big. And I think that this is going to be the strength of green in general in this format, that they can generate across mana curve, they can generate a 7/7 creature all of a sudden. Even the two drop root Walla, if you have domain 5, will become a 7/7. But it also kills like a very respectable 87% of commons and 83% of rares. So this removal is like super efficient because it will trade with many 4 drops, for example, for 3 mana. Then we have Jaya's Fire Nado. That's 5 mana sorcery, deal 5, scry 1. I don't think the card is particularly good, but I guess you're gonna play it sometimes when you just didn't make it on the removal. I mean, at least one thing that is heartwarming about it is that yes, you pay 5 mana, but it's almost a universal removal. So if you play it in a way that doesn't lead to blowouts, you just don't play it into 1 blue open mana or into white and colorless open, then because those colors particularly have tricks that can save a creature by giving it indestructible or hexproof. If you avoid those kinds of punts, then it will more or less kill everything. So that's fine. And just out of curiosity, I put the Artillery Blast, which is a domain a deal damage spell. It deals 1 plus your domain value, so the number of basic land types that you have of damage to a creature. So maximum, it will deal 1 plus 5, so 6 damage. At 6, it kills every common and all but 1 uncommons and rares. So I think it's only doesn't kill the 7/7 gain 5 7 mana uncommon creature and the 5/7. I think Scryfall called it Ape of Industry, the sort of like ape shaman that has multiple effects when something comes into play. So it almost kills everything when you get to domain 5. And I think that it might be a fun strategy once in a while to play this sort of kind of controlling deck based on domain with multiple artillery blasts, because hopefully you're going to see a lot of them if you get to the right pod and you can basically abuse that openness. Right. So someone asked which category is cut down, and it's conditional removal. And by conditional removal, I mean it doesn't kill everything because that something has to fulfill particular criteria. And I've put 4 of those. Cut down is the first one. Cut down kills something that has a power plus toughness equals 5 or less, and costs 1 mana, which is super efficient. I'm absolutely sure it's going to be played and constructed for years to come as a sort of like in some metagames. I think it might be better than Fatal Push. And it kills 74% of common creatures. So in that way, it's as efficient as Lightning Strike. Obviously, it doesn't have this dual utility where it can also go face, but it costs 1 mana less. So for 1 mana less, you basically achieve as much as a 2 mana removal spell. Now, it's not as good in dealing with uncommons and rares, because there's a bunch of 3/3 creatures in there that will not be targeted, some 4/3 creatures that won't be targeted by that, but a Lightning Strike can deal with them. Still, for a 1 mana spell, that's more than you want. Also, 1 mana is the advantage is you can look it up with the Micromancer, the 4 mana 3/3 in blue as an uncommon that lets you find a 1 mana spell. So that's like an extra nice bonus of that card. And so I'm thinking it's always making a deck, basically. It's just the numbers are good enough that you would always want to put it. Now, with the other 3, I don't think that you want to put them in best of 1 queues. Broken Wings kills like sort of 20-25% of creatures on different rarities. It has some utility when you play against white because it can also kill one of their enchantment removals, but you're not guaranteed to play against white decks. So I think that this is the best of 3 card that you're going to put maybe from the sideboard. If you see someone with like 3 citizen arrests and some flyers, then you're quite happy to play it. Destroy Evil, that deals with a creature with toughness 4 or greater and also can kill an enchantment randomly, because as you know, enchantments are evil and creatures with power 4 or greater are evil. This one kills around 1/4 of common and uncommon creatures. Mind you, arguably it kills like the quite valuable ones because these are the big things, but that's not much. It does deal with like 40% of rares and mythics, but I said you don't see them often enough to factor that in as a significant increase. So it maybe reluctantly playable if you have some ways of maybe looting. You're playing some kind of an Esper deck and you want to have answers to things and you have a looter. maybe then you can squeeze it in best of one. But otherwise, I think it's more like a sideboard card. And lastly, we have Smash to Dust, which does like a variety of things. It can destroy an artifact, it can destroy a wall or creature with defender, and it can deal 1 damage to all creatures an opponent controls. It's also a sorcery, which makes it much poorer. I think if it was an instant, it would be actually playable in the main, because you could use it. They attack you with something you blocked in a cunning way, and then deal 1 to everything, and all of a sudden you board wipe them. But at sorcery, not that good. It does kill 35% of the common creatures, because there's a couple of artifact creatures there. There is a bunch of walls, defender creatures, I'm sorry. And there is a bunch of X1s. But also, these are the things that you care the least about. There is also like a bunch of 1/1 soldier tokens in some decks, and I think that this is why it's a valid sideboard card, because, if your opponent spends like a couple of turns playing Argivian Cavalry, the 2/2 that brings a 1/1 with them, then Captain Skull make 3/1/1s, and you just place Smash to Dust, you feel like you basically traded up. You're at least 1.5 for 1, so that's going to be good. So I guess you're going to sideboard that one in against some like go wide strategies. Sweepers. Again, I don't normally cover sweepers, but there's 6 of them in this format. Well, 7 if you count Smash to Dust, which I don't. But 6 proper sweepers. 3 of them are small sweepers, I call them. There's Choking Miasma. I think that card can be pretty good. It's 3 mana, everything gets -2/-2, but if you kick it for 1 green, one of your creatures can get a +1/+1 counter. So it gives a permanent bonus and makes something survive your own wrath. So you can sort of, avert this play pattern of, oh, I don't play anything preparing for the sweeper, and the opponent goes like, aha, he's preparing for a sweeper. So so you can sort of like trick them into making their board a bit broader, and then saving your one thing, which is great. So I think that this card is going to be playable. Again, -2/-2 kills roughly 50% of the commons and roughly 1/3 of uncommons and rares. So that's okay. In some decks, it's going to be quite useful, I guess. Like Elder Dragon Wars, you're going to play it anyway. It's nice that it has this as a first option. So if it's very useful, you will use it. If it's not very useful, you can skip it. Also, nice thing that the first chapter also goes face. So so that's fine. And you get rewarded in the end with the 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. That's just dope. And Temporary Lockdown is the poorest of these ones. I think that this card is designed for constructed. It's like the 5th Oblivion Ring, because you need more Oblivion Rings in this format, obviously. But this one exiles everything with mana value 2 or less, so it's just like a battery of portable holes. I guess you can sideboard it in against some go wide strategies, maybe. But mana value 2 or less is not the same as toughness 2. Like there's a bunch of 3 mana 3/2s that these two deal with, but Temporary Lockdown doesn't. So not exactly the same card. It actually hits similar amount of commons, but I think quite many fewer uncommons and rares. So yeah, it has fewer targets in general. And then there's a bunch of bigger sweepers. Drag to the Bottom is an interesting one, because this one, you can control to some extent how big it is. So, for example, if you want to save one of your creatures, you can not play a land and make your things survive while their things die, because it gives -X/-X for your domain +1. So very much like Artillery Blast that we discussed before, but for everything. So that's nice. I think we can imagine some sort of like a wall Esper shape shell where you will play Drag to the Bottom and play it, kill lots of things, make your things survive, or just like play it to Wrath, basically. So I think it's playable. Karn Silex is sort of like a play on Nevinyrral's Disc. It is it comes into tap to the battlefield like Nevinyrral's Disc, and then it has some random constructed ability that you don't care. But then for X mana, you can exile it and destroy everything that has a mana value X or less. And I think that this might be an interesting sort of play with there is a whole cycle of cards where they are very expensive, but they get cost reduction. An example being Tolarian Terror, which is a 7 mana 5/5 ward 2 creature, but it gets cheaper for every instant or sorcery in your graveyard. So you can actually cheat that Tolarian Terror by playing early instants and sorcery, play it like for 4 or 5 mana, put Karn Silex, Wrath, and for 6, and you kill everything on their side, but your 7 mana creature stays on board and can take over the game from there. So that's a neat trick. And Temporal Firestorm is more like a ramp reward, because for 5 mana it's basically a Wrath because it deals 5 to everything. But you can kick it for blue and one and blue and one white. And every time you kick it, you can phase out one of your permanents. So you can do the sort of same thing as I told you with Silex, but with any creature that you have. So basically just remove 2 of your creatures somewhere in the limbo, and everything else gets 5. Your creatures return. The next turn you start on the front foot, basically, against the opponent. So I think interesting sweepers in the format, and also sweepers that are difficult to play around, because people that play them actually can plan their strategies in such a way that they can commit to the board, but at the same time not risk losing their creatures when the sweeper hits. So yeah, that's interesting. And also the first time I covered the tempo removal in here, because I think that tempo decks are going to be a thing at the Jeskai Wedge. Was it Shard? No, doesn't matter, does it? But there's a bunch of white, blue, and red spells that that are good in tempo. As you can see, as I told you, that blue is. Thank you very much, moving the wedge. Okay, the blue is focusing on tempo, and you can see that it's all blue cards or cards from other colors, but that have a blue kicker that I selected. And there's 2 broad categories of them. One is stun counters, and that's the new wording for does not untap during the next untap phase. And there are 3 cards that do it. Stall for Time just taps 2 creatures, and when you kick it, they don't untap. They get the stun counters, and also draws a card. So that's a pretty good card. 5 mana, tap 2 creatures, so they skip 2 attacks, or they clear the path for you to make a lethal attack, and you draw a card as well. So your tempo deck is pretty hungry for cards. Impede Momentum is just good because it removes a creature for 2 mana for 3 turns, but you want to play it in decks where in those 3 turns, opponent is going to be dead or almost dead, and you don't care that the creature returns because it'll be too late then. And also Scry's 1, which is nice. It's not a card draw, but it's something. And Frostfist Strider is like sort of like a new take on Berg Strider. It costs 1 blue more, so it's harder to cast. Same mana cost, same stat line for 4. It has ward, but it always puts the stun counter, like Berg Strider. If you didn't have a snowland, didn't work. So it's a neat way of doing it. And with those cards, you play as you expect. You are just going to tap things out of the way for your attacks to be useful. There's a couple of cards that can also benefit from you casting things on your turn. Like there is a 2/1 with Vigilance in blue. When you cast a spell, it becomes unblockable. So you can tap a bunch of things or remove something from your future attacking and make way for your guys to hit face. And the second category of tempo removal is bounce spells, where you don't deal with the threat permanently, but you make the opponent recasting it and investing resources in it again. And that basically means that, if you paid 4 mana for a 4/4, that's fine. If you pay 8 mana for a 4/4, not so great. And if you can do it by paying 3 mana and getting back a card, you're sort of like gaining time to do your thing. So they play the 4/4 to block, you remove it, swing with your flyers, they replay it, you can tap it, attack again, and that's the kind of plan I imagine for those type of decks. Now, those 3 bounce effects that I selected are good because they bounce something while giving you resources. Because Tolerant Gazer makes you draw a card. Ether Channeler it's basically like a 2/1 mana war. It creates this 2/1 body that is in tempo strategies can do quite a lot because you will remove the blockers, you'll clear the path for it, that's fine, or it will chump, allowing you to race with your other creatures. And G2 Amplifier, A can be a 2-drop, and a decent 2-drop because it gets +2/+0 for every spell that you cast. So you can actually go for quite a lot of damage using it. Like imagine you play turn to G2 amplifier, they play some creature, you bounce it, swing for 3, draw a card. They replay it, you tap it, swing for 3, swing for 3, scry, and that kind of pattern. They're already at 14, and they still then don't have anything on board. They have to cast another creature just to have a blocker. At some moment, they are not capable of attacking, and that's the moment when you can slow down your tempo strategy and prepare for something like stall the time and at the end of turn and then finish off the last points of damage. But later in the game, this can become a 5 mana mana war, which is just good enough. It will just clear one blocker, make space for other attacks for you. So that's great. Right. So this is the end of the removal part. I think that removal looks very interesting in this format, and I'm super curious about what's going to be better than the others. I didn't mention, but for example, Tribute to Urborg, it gives -2/-2, but in particular decks, when you can kick it for 2 blue, or blue and 1 and blue, it gives additional -1/-1 for each instant sorcery that you have in your graveyard. And basically, if you have the right deck, it will very quickly become 4 mana kill anything. And if -2/-2 is not for 2 mana is not good enough in this format, if you play blue-black, you might get quite a few of those. So you play the first one to kill a small thing, second one it kills a 3/3, third one it can kill like a 4/4. That is even if you don't cast any other spells, or if you don't loot any other spells, or if you don't mill any other spells, which you have plenty of effects that will mill you and loot. Okay. Now, for the archetypes, I'm going to talk about the multicolor cards only. And multicolor cards, I mean the multicolor rares, the multicolor uncommons, and there's two cycles of them. One cycle has only 2 colored pips in the cost. The other cycle has 3 colored pips in the cost. So like Tura Kenrut, Sky Knight has blue, blue, white, and then 2. And this one will only have blue, white. But on top of that, you will also get an uncommon with the kicker of the opposite color, a common with the kicker of the opposite color, and the vice versa combination of those, also uncommon and common. So I'm going to talk about those cards, how they synergize with each other, and how likely you're going to get them if you're the only drafter of that color in the pod. Hey, Josh, I already mentioned you in my preamble and your excellent review on MTGA Zone. I might have mentioned also that I hope that there is no 2 Joshes in the world because 1 is enough. Stan, Paranoid Partisan. So one thing that I noticed when I looked at those cards is that almost every single one of those rare 2-color cards are constructed plants, which means that a whole bunch of them is either unplayable or close to being unplayable, or something that you probably want to put in your deck, but you don't want to draft it in your first 3 picks, which is probably also meaning that due to the arena economy, you're not going to get them because people will pick them because it's a rare and that gives them 20 gems at some stage, or it will be for their collection because people rare draft. So Stan is actually one that you possibly can play because it's a 2 mana 2/2 that spells you cast to the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. So if you can imagine you play it on turn 2, you have a bunch of creature in your hand, you choose a creature, and then you can play like a 4-drop on turn 3 and a 5-drop on turn 4 and stuff like that. So that's actually quite useful on a 2/2 because you still need 2 drops. So this is one that you can basically play. Oh, okay, yeah. You can choose instant or sorcery, and you will have like in those decks you will have If it could choose creatures, it would be too busted. You're right. So you can play like this, and on turn 3 you can play Call the Captain and have 3/1/1 creatures, which is 3/1/1 tokens, which is still good in your book. And then you can tap something and draw a card. There are ways of abusing that. Rip Umori. Um, then what I also noticed is that the two series of multicolor spells are usually feeding each other. So they basically have a synergy between them. Like, for example, look at these. If you have both of those on board, you have Rough Weatherlight Stalwart, which is whenever you cast instant sorcery spell, you may tap two untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. And this one, when you cast instant sorcery spell, you create a 1/1 soldier creature token. So so basically, when you cast a spell, you create this 1/1. You can also tap this 1/1 to activate the Rough Weatherlight Stalwart's ability and draw a card. They basically feed each other because their synergies are aligned. And also later, Rough can give +1/+1 to those soldier tokens that you generate with Tura. Now, of course, the problem is Tura is a bit overcosted, so you probably won't be willing to play it that much. But it's there. It's there. The synergies are there. Then we have the monocolored spells with the kicker. And here I'm going to be looking mainly at, do I want to draft those cards when I'm not playing the other color and when I cannot kick them? So for example, Runic Shot destroys target tapped creature if it was kicked Scry 2. Like Scry 2 for 1 mana is not a great bonus. I will do it when I have mana to spend, but I will survive with the spell that destroys target tapped creature for 1 mana in a deck that wants that kind of an effect. So I think that this card will be picked for any color deck, and people will be happy to play it. Stall for Time. If I don't kick it, I draw a card and I tap 2 creatures. And in some decks, that's going to be just enough. So I think that there's going to be slight competition for that spell from other color combinations, because you might want, like end of turn Stall for Time, next turn attack with like 5/1/1 tokens and play charge +2/+1 to all my creatures and win the game like that. But I think it's significantly better if I can kick it to make it like my top end in the blue-white deck, when I can use the kicker ability to make sure that the board is clear for me for a couple of attacks to finish the game. So I think that this spell is going to be probably mostly for blue-white, but not exclusively for blue-white. Protect Negotiators. I think that this is a kind of a spell that you will be getting in the blue-white more likely, because it's not a very good counter spell because it doesn't work on an empty board, and your 2 mana counter spell, you probably want to make sure that you can cast it on turn 2. There's not so many good 1-drops in the format, so I assume that people will not be super stoked to draft it. And anyway, white is the one that can generate the white boards, so it will naturally be the best home for it, because then you can get like easily 3 creatures by turn 4, and then you can play a 2-drop, leave this one up, or you can do nothing and leave this one up to kick it. So I think that this one you'll have access to. A different story with Tolarian Gazer, because I think that this card is just good on its face value. Kicker, gain 3 life is just an addition. What you want from that effect is the 3 mana, bounce something, draw a card. And I think that blue-white will have difficulties in being exclusive on that card, because, for example, blue-red is going to pick most of them. So you won't get it as a reward of picking the blue-white lane. Right. White-black. Rare, that's clearly a constructed plant. There's, I think, 3 zombies in the format. Oh, there's 3 zombies, but one of them is the Ratadrabik of Urborg. And 2 other ones are, I think, the Necromas, the 7 mana 5/5. And there is something small there. There's the 2 mana 3 that deals that you lose 2 life when you cast it. So not so great, I guess. Maybe if you have like a bunch of legendary creatures in your deck, then you can play it because you will get the zombie when they die. Maybe. On the other hand, Elias Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim, and Aaron Benalia's Ruin. Great creatures, both of them. So 2 mana 2 death touch. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So Aaron Benalia's Ruin, 3/3 with menace, and it can sacrifice creature, which will, if you have both of them on board, which will trigger the lose life. So you sacrifice it, but it still do some damage. Um, and you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So this is basically your plan is I want to go wide, and then I want to start sacrificing meaningless creatures to make my less meaningless creatures bigger. So yeah, like a cool combination. And while I'm doing it, I'm gaining life because I want to go wide from this one, and also I'm sacrificing creatures, so opponent is losing life from this one. So they work together quite well. In terms of the kicker spells, Phyrexian Missionary, it's a 2 mana 2/3 lifelinker. That's a great stat line, and people will just take it to play it as a 2 mana 2/3 lifelinker. That's just good enough. Um, of course, with kicker, if you draw it later in the game, it becomes a 4 mana 2/3 lifelink 2/1, which is amazing. But the problem is because it's so good on its face value, unfortunately, you probably won't be getting a lot of them. I think it would be better if it was like a 1 mana 1/2 life linker, and when you kick it for black and 2, it becomes it returns a creature card from your graveyard to your hand and gets a +1/+1 counter. Then maybe the black white could benefit from it being there, I think. Then Banali Sleeper, it's a 2 mana 3/1, and if you kick it, each player sacrifices a creature. Now, obviously, the idea is that you have a bunch of 1/1 soldiers, which you can sacrifice without too much crying. But 3/1 for 2 might be just good enough in any other white deck. So other white drafters might just steal it from you. And then we have Sheldred's Restoration. That's a reanimate spell. I really love how they made it look like the Tempest reanimate in sort of like shape of the creature there. That's like a nice touch of referencing older cards. But you lose life very much like on the 1 mana reanimate from Tempest. Same effect for 1 mana. Talking about power decreep. And when you kick it, you gain life rather than losing. So it completely flips. But it costs 7 mana. Then reanimating for 7 mana, you might as well cast your 7 mana spell for that price. I don't think that there's going to be much competition for that. But also, I don't think there is much need for that. And I think that it will fit with blue black to some extent because blue black has looters, and that will help you getting those cards into graveyard. So yeah. And we have Phyrexian Warhorse. That's a 4 mana 3/3 kicker, 1 white. You make a soldier in the price of it, and you sacrifice creatures, and it gets +2/+1 until end of turn. I think that this one you might be getting all of them if you're playing black white because 4 mana 3/3 that has a sacrifice synergy in other colors just doesn't make much sense. So you might get it as a black white. And I'm still not sure if that's a good card, but some people say it might be good. I'm going to listen that it's possible. Okay, white red, again rare, clearly a constructed plant. It's in this format. It's basically a 4 mana 4/4, unless you want to meme with the Weatherlight Star Skyship or whatever it's called, the Weatherlight Completed, because Weatherlight Complete doesn't have a crew cost. With this card, it does, because all the vehicles you control have crew 1, so it gains crew 1, and then you can just crew 1 and attack for 5 in the air. So yeah, I'm sure that someone will do it. Maybe Josh, you can make it as one of your bounties in the podcast. Crew 1, crew the Weatherlight thanks to Astor, Bearer of Blades, and make people waste their drafts on trying to achieve this pipe dream. Then we have Bayard Argivian Recruiter, and that's at 2 mana, so red and white, 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, you make a 1 white soldier token. So basically, if you would put a +1/+1 counter on Bayard, you would control a creature with a 3 power, but on the card here it's written 2. so it has a higher power than the base power, and you would make a 1/1. So that's pretty strong, I think, in general. Like the card is pretty strong, and there's many ways of doing it, including attacking with enlist and making the creature survive, putting counters, or Tori Davenant Fury Rider. This one, whenever it attacks, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Now, hopefully, if you have both of those, that means that one of your attacking creatures will survive. And because one of your attacking creatures will survive, at the end of the turn, it will have a higher power. And you create the 1/1 white soldier creature token, which in turn will mean that the power of Tori Davenant next turn, if it survives the attack, will become higher because you get an additional body that you can boost. So yeah, so yeah, basically these two work together well, feed well together. They're like contain the same synergy. In terms of monocolored cards, Cleaving Skyrider. I think that there will be people interested in a 3-mana 2/2 Winddrake with Flash, but it's so much better if you can kick it. You can basically do it offensively, so you attack with 6 creatures. During the attack, you flash it in with kicker, you deal 6 to one target. You can remove a blocker, or you can go face for lethal damage or something like that. But you can also do it defensively. Someone attacks you, you play that one in, and it deals X damage to one of the attackers. This can chump something else, and all of a sudden, from a situation when you were losing a game, you might have a swing back for lethal, for example. Heroic charge. Again, here a kicker. So it's a 4-mana creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. And if you kick it, they also gain trample. Now, it's a nice addition, the trample, and sometimes you will use it. But I think that the most important part of this card is just the +2/+1. I think that you're going to be competing for this card with at least white green that might want to have it. So you won't be exclusive on it. Herland Battle Hymn, 3-mana, deal 4 to any creature or planeswalker, and kicker is gain for life. It's a nice kicker, but I will be also happy with the 3-mana, deal 4 to any creature in this format. So people will take that away from you. And I think that Keldon Strike Team, that's 3-mana, 3/1 haste, basically haste creature. If you kick it, you make 2 1/1s. I think that this card is way better with 2 1/1s. It also synergizes with the white. So I think that this is the card that you might be getting as if you're the only red-white drafter in the pod. You might be getting those quite late because no one will be interested in playing that creature unless you can kick it. Okay, white-green. Now, first, good news for the white-green. The rare is all but a constructed land. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be fine in some constructed decks, and there's going to be something playing in it, playing it, because that's basically Living Glorious Anthem for free. But it's also really good in limited because you have so many of those soldiers in white-green, and making 1/1s, 2/2s is good. And also, it has the ability to make itself bigger and create one more body. You can basically sacrifice them to. It does a lot. So it's like it's a really, really good card. So that's one of those few rare multicolor spells that you will be super happy to play. And then we have 2 uncommons, and again, both of them sort of feed on each other. When this thing becomes tapped, it puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with toughness less than the number of basic land types among lands you control. So say you have 2 land types, forest and plains. You tap it in some way, either by attacking or by giving. This is the 4th archetype, Grim Monolith. So we have 6 to go. Oh, actually 6.5 because we're halfway through white-green. So if you tap it in any way by enlisting or by attacking with it, all your 1/1s become 2/2s. And Queen Alanal, basically power toughness equal to the number of creatures you control. But also, whenever you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, you create any creature token, you create extra 1 soldier. which is a great target for the Zar Ojan and Silent of Efrava, because one ones will always become bigger because you will have two different land types when you play that card, because you will have this, at least plain and the forest. Maybe you can have like an off color third one, and if you manage to enlist something else with it or attack with it, your one ones will become 2/2s and then 3/3s. So they again feed themselves by Queen Alenel being able to go more wide and also increasing herself in the process, and Zar Ojanen basically making those one ones into a bigger threat that you actually can't ignore anymore. Now here we have the rewards. The white uncommon, I think that it's not going to be very much challenge because it looks pretty bad. That's bad news. That even if you play the kicker, it's still bad. It's basically like 7 mana Mahamoti. That's not good in modern age. And 5 mana 3/4 is also nothing that you'll be super happy, especially in the archetype when you really want to go wide. So yeah. Juniper Order Rootweaver. Now this is different. I know that according to some, a 2 mana 2/2 is sometimes important in a deck, but this card is literally a vanilla 2/2 when you play it outside of the white green. So I think that you might be getting them. I mean, people still will take them because they think that they need 2 drops. But not to the same extent. They will be like last priority, so you might be probably hoping to wield those things. And with a kicker, actually, that's pretty decent because you have a 3/3/4/3, which is okay. And the fact that you can put that extra counter not on its own, but maybe on something else is a bonus because you can put it on an invasive threat, or you can put it on something that allows you to attack into the board of the opponent. So that's pretty good. And I think that you're going to be rewarded if you're in white-green with getting a bunch of those Juniper Order Root Weavers. It will be an interesting, actually, analysis that I'm definitely going to do within the first 2 weeks of looking how those cards perform in their archetype or in the archetypes that don't have access to the other color. So that will be an interesting one. In green, we have Strength of the Coalition. That's a 1 mana plus give target creature +2/+2 until end of turn. But if it's been kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Now, this 1 mana to give +2/+2 is not enough for a spell for me. I don't think that people will be picking it when they don't play white. But if you kick it, whoa, that's the blowout. I mean, you will always be making blocks and just like crossing your fingers that they don't play this. I can tell you that already. So I think that this is a super good card for white green that you will probably be able to get late because as a reward in being white green if you're the only white green drafter in the pod. And Scout the Wilderness is a weird one. It's a 3 mana, search your library for a basic. So keep in mind, you can't take those dual lands with it, but just the normal basic. Put it tapped and then shuffle, and you can kick it to make 2/1/1 soldiers. I still don't know how good this card is, but I think that you will have some minor competition from domain decks, but you should be getting access to it. The question is, do you want to play? And do you want to play it? And I think that in most white-green decks, you don't. But I also think that there will be white-green decks that you are interested in it. It's not the go white, green white decks. It's the sort of domain focused green white decks where those 2/1/1s are more like champ blockers than aggressors. And you want to use them to survive long enough to do some kind of bigger and more obscene things. And this further ramping you and giving you bigger domain payoffs is going to be useful. So maybe it's going to be like a band deck or something like that. Blue black rare is playable. I still don't know how good, because the effect is like it's a 4 mana 3/2 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, you can counter a spell and make the controller of that spell draw a card, or you can destroy another creature or planeswalker and its controller draws a card. So I guess you kill something really good and hope that the card that they drew is not as good. That's basically it, and you get a nice 3/2 body with it. So sort of like 2 for 2, 1 for 1. Yeah, you can target your own creature to draw a card as well, and basically replace your other creature with Archetype. I mean, it's probably going to be a decent card, and it's definitely playable in limited, unlike many others. So cool. Um, we're gonna see in the first weeks how good is the win rate, but I assume it's like a kind of quality rare. It's not gonna be a bomb, but it's not gonna be bad. It's going to be just fine, probably above average. Um, right. Vohar, Vidalian Desecrator. That's a 2 mana 1/2. It's a looter with a tap, which is always a good thing. And when you discard an instant or sorcery with the looting, you drain one. And you can sacrifice it later in the game, and you may cast target instant sorcery card from your graveyard this turn and exile this spell from your graveyard. Play it only as a sorcery, so you cannot just like do it because someone kills your Vohar. I think solid card. Importantly, it drains for discarding instant and sorceries. Now we have Rona, which is a 4 mana 3/4. Whenever you cast an instant and sorcery, each opponent loses 1 life. Here they probably it would to me it looks like it's been nerfed in design from drain 1 to only losing 1 life because it might have been too strong with it as a drain card. And you may cast it from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying its other cost. I think that here there's like a minor synergy. They all sort of do those incremental damages independently if you discard those instant sorceries or if you play them. So basically, Vohar fixes the draws that you can play more of them, and if you don't need to play them, you can discard them and also drain. Blah blah blah. So minor synergy between those, but it's more like common interests and common goals between them. They don't feed directly to each other as the previous one did. Okay, the archetypes, the monocolor spells. Like okay, Rona's Vortex, 1 mana unsummon. If you kick it, it becomes a removal. Now this is a good it's a good reward for being blue black because unsummon is not spectacular. I think still maybe some of the tempo decks might be tempted to use one because it costs 1 mana. It's very efficient, but the card becomes so much better as a 4 mana removal, and I think that this is maybe something you're going to get rewarded a lot if you're blue black. You're just going to get it because no one is going to be interested in getting it if they are not blue black. So you can count on them in pack 3 or something when you draft blue black and you're the only person on the pod. Phyrexian Espionage, on the other hand, it's a 3 mana divination. If you kicked it, opponents discard card. I think that 3 mana divination, if it's good, is going to be good as a 3 mana divination. You don't need to kick it, so you're not going to be rewarded with this one. Monstrous Warleech, 4 mana XX with a kicker of 1 blue. As it enters the battlefield, when it was kicked, mill 4 cards. And its power and toughness are equal to the highest mana value among the cards in your graveyard. Now, obviously, it mills you to the graveyard. When it happens, you want to be milling. I think that this card is probably just unplayable in other archetypes, and maybe there are some builds of blue black that can cheat it in as a 4 mana 7/7 and hope that that's enough to win the game because there's not so many big creatures in this format. The problem with vanilla 7/7 in a format with like multiple 1/1 token generators is that you can just attack into 1/1s for all your life, and then they will just chip damage you for 3 a turn, and you're going to lose that race. But we have tribute to, but I think you're going to get it quite a lot. And tribute to Urborg, 2 mana, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. If it's kicked, additional -1/-1 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Now, I don't think people should draft it highly because 2 mana to deal 2 damage is not a good deal if you can't kick it, if you don't get the flexibility of that. But they will still do it. So I think that you should be rewarded for being blue black and getting more of those cards, but you won't be rewarded because people overvalue certain types of removal. Right, blue red. The rare is Joyra, Ageless Innovator, constructed plant. Just, just, just don't. It just doesn't work. So Sad. A 2 mana 2/3. I mean, if you're in the market for a 2 mana 2/3, she's for you. But I don't think that you're in that market. Or maybe you are. Maybe you are in a tempo deck. Then we have the two uncommons, Balmor and Najal. Balmor 1/3 for 2 mana flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. Najal the Storm Runner. Well, you may cast sorcery spells at instant speed, and when you do that during the attack, you may copy it for 2 mana. So basically, the idea is you attack with the Najal, you can play the sorcery during the attack and copy it. Now, the copy won't trigger the Balmor's ability, I'm pretty sure, but you may cast something like Impede Momentum, which will put stun counters on 2 creatures rather than 1. And also, by playing the sorcery at instant speed, Najal becomes a 6/4 with trample, which is much better than a 5/4 without trample. Among other abilities. So yeah. Yeah, I mean the archetype looks banger. Let's look at the monocolored cards. Battlewing Mystics, 2 mana flying with 2/1 with flying. And Kicker Red, discard a hand, draw 2 cards. So in later game, you have 0 cards in your hand, you discard nothing, and you draw a card. The 2 cards. So a great card. Unfortunately, 2 mana, 2/1 flyer is just good enough for other decks that they will steal it from you. So you can't count on it as a reward. Timely Interference, 1 mana, target creature gets -1/-0, and draw a card. And if you kick it, that creature blocks this turn, if able. I think that there will be decks that want it, but probably you're more likely as the only blue-red drafter on the pod that you're going to get them winning. I think that white-blue of some sorts might be also interested in it, but the card is like really good when you kick it because it acts as a sort of removal. And if you can only kick it as a sort of cycling that gives a slight advantage in combat, you might pick other cards higher. So you might get it just later because of that. And then we have Fires of Victory. 2 mana, deal as much damage as you have cards in your hand. I think that this card will be good in other decks because it's like a good removal early, and if you play right, it can be also something in the late game. And also in decks like that want to have Fires of Victory, I don't think that you care that much about what goes later because you should be winning those games quite quickly. So yeah, I think it's going to be stolen from you. Although when you kick it, it's markedly better because in the late game it can become like a sort of poor man's. What was the card's name? Damn it! 5 mana, deal 4 or something, and draw a card. Anyway, it's like a poor man version of this one, but it has flexibility, so that's the thing. And we have Gitu Amplifier. That's a 2 mana 1/2. That whenever you cast instant or sorcery spell gets +2/+0 at the end of turn. It's a good card without kicker, but I don't think it fits to any other red archetype. So as a blue-red mage, you might get them late in the draft if you're the only one that drafts the color combination. If you kick it, it becomes a like 5 mana war basically. Blue-green archetypes. Ivy, Gleeful, Spell Thief, lots of text, but I think that the most important is 2 mana flying 2/1. And I think that it's playable because of the stats. The ability is like, meh, extra. So we're going to be playing it because of the stat line probably. But you also don't want to maybe pick it super early because just like a vanilla creature almost maybe sometimes they will do something with the ability. Nile, Avizoa, Aeronaut, 4 mana, 2/4 flying, domain. It basically looks at top X card of your library and puts one of them on top of it. And if you have domain 5, you draw a card rather than just putting the card on top of the library. I think that this is like a payoff for decks that aim at achieving domain 5 because it's so much better to draw a card than just look at cards and arrange them. Um, and these two actually don't have too much synergy between them in a way that maybe Nile sort of looks at the cards and lets you draw the extra land so that Tatoya can be activated. Tatoya is a 3/3. Lands creatures you control have flying. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 land becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land, and I think that because they don't have this overlap and the other ones do, I think that this might have been nerfed, and I think it might have been that initially it was arrange the cards on the top of library. If the top card of your library after that is a land, you can put it in the battlefield tapped. That's my like weird guess that that's how it was done in the early development, and then that was nerfed because maybe it was too powerful, and because of that, it's a probably weaker creature that wouldn't break the format. And then if it would put lands on the battlefield, it would have nicely synergized with Tatyova because you will get lands that can turn later into elementals and blah blah. Okay. In terms of the monocolor cards, Joint Exploration, it's a 2-mana scry to draw. If it was kicked, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So like a weird version of Growth Spiral. Now, maybe some tempo decks, some sorcery instant-based decks will be interested in just 2-mana, scry 2, and then draw, but not many. So you should be getting this as a reward for being blue-green. Question is, how good is that reward? How much do you want to be ramped into 5 mana? Pixie Illusionist, 1-mana, 1-1 with flying. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters. Then it can tap to make target land you control becoming a basic land type of your choice until end of turn. So sort of like mana smoothing mechanic. I think that there might be a market for some 1-mana, 1-1 flyers in other decks, but for what it's worth, you should be getting a decent amount of that as a reward for being in blue-green. Elvish Hydromancer, 3-mana, 3/2. And when you kick it for 4, it copies target creature you control, makes a token that is a copy of that. I guess that few people want a 3-mana 3/2 vanilla, so you should get like all the rewards if you are the only blue-green drafter. And same goes with Vineshaper Prodigy. It's a 2-mana 2/2, and the kicker is 1 blue. And when you kicked it, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest at the bottom of your library. So I think that blue-green maybe doesn't look like the strongest color on the face of it, but if you're the only drafter in blue-green, you can get some quite powerful cards late, because lots of those cards will go late in draft if there is no other blue-green drafter on the pot. So you can, amass like 4 Vineshaper Prodigies in your deck and get a bunch of Joint Exploration for ramping or something, which is not bad. And something to keep in mind when you play the format, because I think it's going to be important to know in which color pairs you might get those extra good rewards because no one else is interested in them. Black-red, rare, is a constructed plant clearly, but for 3-mana, 3/3 menace is still decent. So if you see it late, you might be interested just for the stats. Although you probably, again, you won't be able to pick it as late as you want to pick 3/3 menace for 3. That is hard to cast. So more often than not, you're not going to get it because it's a rare, and Economy of Arena promotes rare drafting. Now here we have a nice combo with like almost Hand of Hatred. Basically, 3-mana 1/3. Every turn you make a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste, and you sacrifice it at the beginning of next step. And then it has a weird secret ability when 5 creatures die on 1 turn of any player. So you can actually offer like interesting trades. You can tap it to basically a demonic tutor, which is an effect that is probably worth like 3-4 mana. So if you manage to achieve that, you're in the business because you got yourself a free 4-mana spell. Not a spell that you would normally play, but because the front side of it is already good, I think that it's going to be happening a couple of times, and you can pick whatever you need after the big attack. And then you have Garna, Bloodfist of Keld. That's a 4-mana 4/3, and whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. So if they chump block the 2/1 red elemental, you draw a card. And if they don't chump it, it deals sort of 3 damage rather than 2. So these cards definitely feed well with each other, because if you make this elemental and it will die every turn, you're going to get Garnet triggers every turn as well, which very quickly becomes lethal, and or very quickly becomes like a super card advantage engine for you. In terms of the cards, oh, why there's a G2 amplifier? That shouldn't be here. Now I have to check which one was supposed to be there. Okay, but first of all, we have Balduvian Atrocity. That's a 3-mana 2/3 menace, which is not good enough, I think, to play on its own, so you should be getting those. And it has a kicker. You can basically unearth a creature that costs 3 or less from your graveyard. It has haste and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So you can get a like, neat value for this 1 extra mana, and I don't think that it's going to be super challenged, because the 3-mana 2/3 vanilla creature with menace, well, French vanilla with menace. Oh yeah, thank you very much. Is no, it didn't snack its way here. It actually probably stayed because I copied slides from previous color combination and I forgot to remove one of them. That's what happened. So yeah, this should be a good reward for being black-red, and actually the ability seems pretty decent because 1 mana is not a big cost for getting the threaten effect. Aggressive Sabotage, 3 mana, discard 2 cards, and you can kick it to deal 3 damage to that player. Oh god, never copy a seminar from me, because it's all based on copy pasting, so I can do it in time that I have, which is very little. It's a lot of thinking and then little time to actually do it. And also, I was watching Alex's seminar when I was finishing the slides, and that probably is the effect of that. So I think that you will be able to get that card. The problem is that the card is just not good. So it's like a fake reward. Oh, is it a Counter Strike? Okay, yeah, okay. Warhost's Frenzy, that's 3 mana instant Trumpet Blast, basically. Gives +2/+0 to all your creatures until end of turn. But if it's been kicked, whenever a creature you control dies this turn, you draw a card. So in combat, this can become like a massive swing, because you attack, they make the blocks, they basically make the blocks so that their creatures survive, and yours die. You play this, now all creatures die, including yours probably, because it doesn't give any toughness bonus. But for every creature that died of you, you draw a card, and they lose the creatures that they didn't expect to die. So this can be a card that is like a massive, massive turnaround in the game. And I think that a 3 mana instant that gives +2/+0 is almost undraftable. So you might be the only one interested in it if you're the only player playing black and red. So that's like a super good reward of being black and red. And the other card that we don't have here because whatever is the 4 mana threaten effect. So 4 mana steal a creature of the opponent, and you can kick it for 3, 2 and a black. And if you do, then that creature gets sacrificed at the end of turn no matter what. So it basically turns it into a very clunky 7 mana removal. Yes, Josh, there might be fringe cases when some red Boros player might take it because they don't have charges. But if they don't have charges, I mean, what are they doing drafting Boros? Come on. So it might happen, but I think that like most of the time, you probably will be the only one interested if you're the only one drafting this color combination. Anyway, this threaten effect, you are probably the only one interested in it anyway, because you're the only one with the sack capabilities for the steal and sack. Because you also have bone splinters, 1 mana sacrifice outlet. You can steal something, attack with it, and then after the attacks, you can play bone splinters to kill something of them. So yeah, because you're the only one interested, you're gonna be wheeling then. The question remains to be seen is how good is this in a format when one of the strategies is go wide with 1/1s. I mean, you don't want to steal 1/1s and go face with them just to be chunked by another 1/1. That's not the way. Right. Black green. Good news for Black green. The multicolor rare creature is actually playable. It's a 4 mana 3/4 with reach, and if a creature you control dies, it gets exiled instead. When you do, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token, and you can sacrifice sapling to make this thing bigger or to draw cards if you sacrifice 2 saplings. So, pretty decent card, I think. Uh, if you play attrition game and you trade creatures all the time, you don't trade them proportionally because they lose the creature and you gain you lose a creature and um, gain the an opponent controls. That's even better. Sorry, I didn't read, and I need to clean my glasses and focus more. Um, yeah, well, it's still good. I mean, whenever you trade, you still get the you still get the 1/1, and basically it's still this proportional effect. Also, you can just play removal and get a 1/1 as a bonus to each of them, and then you can basically trade them for damage or trade them for cards. So you basically like a perfect attrition card because it makes your attrition more attritiony. Um, and you make their Lurgo stuck, yes, indeed. And you don't hose your graveyard, which would have been actually probably not so good for what you try to do in here. And here we have Botrug Bone Rattle and Urg Spawn of Turg. That's a name. So Botrug is a 6-drop 4/4, and with Domain, when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, choose target creature card in your graveyard, return it to the battlefield if its mana value is less or equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. So this is one of the cards that you want to go like heavier on Domain, because you want to get like a 4-drop or a 5-drop. I mean, as much as you possibly can. Urg Spawn of Turk is a 3 mana 0/5 most of the time. That its power is equal to the number of lands in your graveyard, and at the beginning of upkeep, you may look at the top card of your library and you may put that card in your graveyard. By doing that, you can actually deliver something for Botrug to reanimate. So they feed on synergies like this. So you're basically a feeding the graveyard with Urg, and because Botrug is mana hungry and wants multiple types of lands, you want to be ramping into it in some way, and probably ramping with lands, which at some stage will become so plentiful that you can actually start sacrificing them, gaining life, and making Urg from his 0/5 wall into an actual threat. So yeah, interesting. Obviously, Urg can also mill cards for itself, so it's a self-contained synergy with this card. Super interesting how this one works, but I think if I have all 3 of those, I'm in a good start of a shell. Because they look like quite synergistic with each other and quite neat. If the kind of slow deck that they present can exist in the metagame, which according to Alex, actually, you can have decks at all kind of speeds here, so that's fine. In terms of the uncommons, there's Choking Miasma. I think that this card will be sideboardable in some other archetypes, but I think it fully blossoms in green-black because that extra kicker with +1/+1 can allow you different play patterns that will lead people into falling into a trap of it. So I think you won't get all of them, but you will get quite a large chunk of them in black-green because that's where you should be playing it. Urborg Repossession, that's 1 mana, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand and gain 2 life. But if you kicked it, you can get another target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can get a creature and 2 life, or a creature any permanent and also 2 life if you kick it. I think that's so much better with kicker that making it from 1/1 into a 2/1, that you're going to be getting all of those that you need if you're playing black green. So yeah, that's hopefully a good reward. Terra Sunder, 2 mana, destroy artifact or enchantment. That card is trash if it's not kicked. If you kick it, it's 4 mana, destroy any permanent, which becomes great. So this is like an easy award for black green. You're going to be getting them late, and that's actually a great reward for being in the archetype. And we have Bog Badger, 3 mana, 3/3. And when you kick it, all your creatures get menace. I think that 3 mana, 3/3 is still something that people will draft um, in any green deck. I'm not saying it's right, but they will. So you won't get rewarded by that. But with kicker, it becomes like from this creature that is like a clunky creature into something that can potentially end the game because you play it like on a board stall attack and they are not. I think that, yeah, Josh. So yeah, of course, there is always the risk that people are going to be taking green cards and trying to make domain decks that are 5-color nonsense. That's true. But then you're technically not the only green black drafter on the table, and also prioritize lands, because if they don't get the green black lands or things like that, they might not be able to cast it and they will not pick it. But I think that because how it is worded, Terra Sander is going to have a higher alsa than some other of those uncommons, which are good on the face value already. And the last one, last archetype is red green. Rare is a constructed plant. It's a 3-mana 3/3. That's not exciting enough if it's hard to cast. It has tap and untapped non-token artifact you control to add green, or tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control, exile the top card of the library. You may play it this turn. Now, I'm going to try to make it work in this format, and I'm going to lose gems on that. Don't do that at home, please. Respect your gems. Don't try to meme weird decks. But I definitely am going to try to make something with like a bunch of those 1-mana artifacts that can look for a land or draw a card, and try to make them into like my personal howling mine or something. But yeah, not a good idea. It's a constructed plan. Probably you should avoid it, which is unfortunate for red green. You respect your gems and you buy cosmetics. That's no, that doesn't work, Josh. Oh yes, J.M. Harkins. I think that nonsense deck with mana workers. You have my ear already. Yeah, that's true. So I think that there might be deck when it can be okay. Let's put it there. Rada Coalition Warlord um, is a 4-mana 3/3 classic hill giant. Domain, whenever it becomes tapped, another target creature you control gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of basic land types and what lands you control. So, you have 3 different types of basic lands, you tap it, something gets +3/+3. You can basically use it to enlist something, and there's plenty of enlist creatures in red and green, and it will give +6/+3 if you have 3 types of lands. So yeah, that's the ability of the card. And then Rulik Mons, also a hill giant, also but much harder to cast hill giant for 4-mana green red one. It has menace, which is slightly better. And whenever it attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. And if you didn't put a card into the battlefield this way, you create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. So, either you ramp yourself from 4 to 5, or you create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. Now, the trick, of course, with it is that if you have like an enlist creature, you can enlist something with Rada and then use Rada to give +3/+3 to Rulik Mons, which makes it a 6/6 menace, which becomes like a problem already for the um, uh, for the opponent. So basically, you probably have to combo it with like an extra creature, and then you can make something out of it. But Hill Giants in a format with like a 3-mana bounce draw a card, I don't think that it's going to work very frequently. And of course, the irony being is that it's the tempo decks that got the hexproof card, not the green decks that need it. And last thing, the multicolor cards. Sprouting Goblin, I think that's like a great reward for being green red, because it's a 2-mana 2/2 with red, tap, sacrifice land, draw a card. Not exactly something you'd be super thrilled to play. But if you kick it, it also searches the library for a land card with a basic land type, so you can get duels with it, which is great for a deck that wants to play domain, because you can imagine you start with them, I don't know, forest plains on turn one. Turn two, you play a mountain. Turn three, you play a forest. And turn four, you play this. Look for a, a swamp island. Next turn, you have domain five. Bish, bosh, bosh, done. Um, and I don't think that many people will want that outside of decks that utilize red and green. So if you're red green, you might get it again later as a reward for what you're doing. Viashino Branch Rider, the common, it's a 1 mana, 1/1 haste creature. It can get +2/+0 until end of turn if you play 3 mana. And that's not great, so hopefully you will get all of them. But also, if you kick it, it just becomes a hasty hill giant that can get pumped for 3 mana. I don't know if that's good enough. I don't think it's good enough as a card. So you should be getting those, but should you be happy for getting those? I don't think so. Then we have Yavimaya Iconoclast at 2 mana 3/2 with Trample. And when you kick it for 1 red, it becomes a 4/3 haste Trample until end of turn, which is great. It's a nice turn 4 play. Turn 3 play to play a 4/3 hasty trampling threat. It's also like a really good top deck late in the game when you have a bunch of mana, but the board maybe has been a bit, thinned. And then all of a sudden you just draw a card and just like slam a 4/3 trampler. So that's good. I think that 2 mana 3/2 with trample is just good enough for the green decks, especially in a format with not so many good 2-drops, that it will be stolen from you quite often. And we have Colossal Growth, 2 mana, +3/+3. If it was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. Now, I think it's a good trick because it can make several things, that including giving haste is not nothing, and also big blowouts in combat, and also great with like big enlist creatures, which there are a few. Again, because trample is important. So you should be getting those because it's not so great if you don't kick it. Because the main advantage of that card is giving trample, really. It's like a big finisher, sort of like King Harold's Revenge-ish in this format, because, red and green has a bunch of enlist creatures. You can play it on your enlist creature, enlisted with something big, attack, generate chump block when they think that, oh, I'm just going to chump it, and you just all of a sudden, trample, and that's game. So yeah, you should be getting this as a reward. Talking about that's game. So I would like to thank 17 Lance Team, Viral Misnomer, Hululu, Grant Wu, and ZTM. They are all working super hard on getting the new set in the system, and I feel for them. So send them some love and hopefully Patreon money, because they deserve support. Then big thanks to Fake Jake Brown, who is helping me with delivering the podcast. Now a happily married man. Well, at least married man. I saw the pictures from the wedding, so yes. Thanks to him, this can be actually, audible as a podcast, because he does a lot of magic and sound editing, and I'm super grateful for that. And thanks to MTGA Zone for being the sponsor. And with that, I'll see you next week.